If you ask Sasha Siddhartha, there are 3 core barriers that have prevented consumers from living a healthier lifestyle: price, geography, and information. Now, as the co-founder and CTO of Thrive Market, Sasha is working to eliminate those barriers in order to provide consumers with healthier options, all at the click of a mouse. On this episode of IT Visionaries, Sasha discusses the role that Thrive Market plays in assisting consumers on their personal health journey, and why the grocery industry is making big strides in e-commerce. Enjoy this episode. IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform. This podcast is created by the team at mission.org.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, host of IT Visionaries, and today we have special guest, Sasha. What's going on?
Hey, Ian. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on board.
Yeah, great to have you today. We are all about healthy living made easy here on IT Visionaries. And coincidentally, so is Thrive Market. So I'm super excited to talk about everything Thrive, about what you have under the hood from a technology perspective, and get into your background. So let's get into it. How did you get started in technology in the first place?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I got to it what feels like a little late in the game compared to what I see these days. So when I was in middle school and high school, I was a big gamer. So I always loved building my own systems and hardware. Played a lot of computer games in both console and PC. And at some point along the way, my uncle, who was a software engineer for basically his whole career, kind of needled me a little bit and said, why don't you sort of get up one of these days and actually build one of these instead of just being a consumer, just consuming the content. And I spent some time thinking about that. And, this was in the mid to late 90s. And, obviously the first .com wave was at an all-time high. And there were all these amazing stories about the great things that entrepreneurs and technology businesses were doing in the market. So that got me really excited. So, when it came time to go to college, I started in 99. So I ended up coming out to the West Coast and attended Stanford. And my goal coming into college was to learn how to be an entrepreneur in the technology space. And, Stanford didn't have a business degree. There were some other schools that had kind of dedicated programs around entrepreneurship, but at Stanford, the options were economics and, a variety of technical disciplines, including computer science. So I started studying both of those at the same time, hoping that I'd sort of get the business side down, get the technical side down, and ended up really falling in love with the technical side. Ended up completing both degrees, but found that I love the creative aspect of software engineering and the ability to get out there and build things that add real value and utility and joy to people's lives. Coming out of college, obviously I graduated in 2003. So between when I went in 99 and when I came out, the ecosystem had changed pretty dramatically after the first .com bust in 2000. So it was a really, really tough time for anyone who wanted to even think about starting a business in the technology space at that time. And, I was 20 years old and kind of brand new to the US and definitely much more risk averse than I am today. So, I was looking for, a training ground where I could really start to hone my skills and develop my career in a relatively disciplined way. So, coincidentally at the time, it was really just the big technology companies that were hiring at any scale. So found my way to a role in software engineering at Microsoft, and that sort of wrote my path from there on out for the next several years. So ended up being a developer and an engineering manager across a variety of teams there. Just learned an incredible amount when it came to best practices in building technology at a real scale, and also running engineering teams, technology teams. So that's really how things got started. Obviously where I am today, the startup bug never quite left me. So ended up coming down to LA in 2011 and co-founding my first business with a former Microsoft colleague who was locally working as a venture capitalist at the time and was leaving his firm to go found this business. So that brought me to entrepreneurship, and then ran that business for 3.5 years. Went through some M&A, and then ended up meeting my business partners at Thrive Market, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So flash forward to today. Tell us a little bit about what it means to be CTO of Thrive Market.
Yeah. So we're a mid-sized grocery e-commerce company. As some folks may know, mission of the business is to make healthy living easy and accessible for everyone. We really want to be the leading online brand in the healthy and sustainable product space. So within that, my role as CTO it's twofold. One is taking our business strategy and connecting it with a cohesive technology and digital product strategy. What are the consumer facing experiences that we need to achieve the necessary business outcomes in anything from a 3-month to a 3-year time frame, and vice versa. How can we leverage technology and what's going on in the digital shopping space to inform our business strategy and evolve it in a positive direction? So that's probably where I spend about 75% of my time. I have a product management user experience org and a software engineering org that focuses on building out those consumer facing pieces. The other half of my role is how do we empower the company itself through use of software and systems. And that goes both for the technology org in terms of making sure that everything from internal software architecture to language choice to DevOps and software automation are in place, but also for the non-tech departments within the business, ensuring that we have a cohesive technology strategy where we've got the right productivity tools, the right security posture, the right access and availability to data and analytics for everything from a customer service agent to a head of marketing to be able to make both the best decisions for the business, but also to be able to just have a great workday and operate smoothly and efficiently. So it's balancing those two, and I have orgs that support internal enterprise applications and orgs that support consumer-facing product.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, not to get on the soapbox here, but it just feels like there's so many people like you in startups now in the role of CTO that has kind of like your CIO hat or traditional CIO hat, or it's like internal IT or employee experience type stuff. And then you have like your product centric hat, and that role might be a CTO, it might be a CIO, it might be whatever, CDO. And we talk to folks all the time that have that same sort of thing where it's just the role of the technology leader in a company that is not inherently a technology company and yet has a massive digital technology footprint. It's such a dynamic spot right now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, even businesses that don't have a significant technology component when it comes to the consumer facing experience still need to leverage software to remain relevant and competitive in today's ecosystem, right? So the CIO part of the role is almost universal across all organizations. The other piece of this is that in a startup environment, I think sort of to take the cliche, everyone wears lots and lots of hats. So ultimately, when it's a very small organization, there's usually some person who takes on accountability to figuring out all the tech requirements, onboards the software, starts to figure out a systems and process, and then it kind of builds organically from there. So the interesting thing that I remember from the very early days of, now 2 companies is that, just by virtue of being in the role, I was exposed to kind of e-commerce enablement and technology enablement in such a wide variety of functions. It wasn't just the software development piece. It was, some of the digital marketing. It was a lot of our operations and fulfillment infrastructure, just by virtue of having a small team and everyone needing to collaborate and figure it out. Those are areas that I had the opportunity to dive into quite deeply in the very early phases. At Thrive in particular, obviously the really nice thing is we've had the opportunity to scale really fast as a business and as an organization. And I've had the ability to specialize over time, and we've been able to bring in just amazing domain experts to run some of those other areas. But it's very common, to your point, to see the intersection of use of technology in a broad range of applications across every function of the business these days, because just everything runs on software now.
Yeah, and I want to get into both sides of that piece of Thrive, both internal and product side. But before we get into that, I'm curious, like, what's the size and the scope of what you're doing at Thrive right now? How many folks, and I know you can't share exact specifics, but are using the platform, and like, what are the types of things that they're looking for from a day-to-day basis from Thrive Market?
Yeah, so we're in the high hundreds of thousands, approaching 1 million members right now. at its core, there are consumers looking for two things from us. One, there's a strict utility play in terms of us making sure they can get their healthy groceries, quickly, easily, in a timely manner at great value. The other more interesting part is, we feel very strongly that our consumers see us as a trusted partner in their journey through healthy living. And that comes down to, everything from curation of our site so that they can shop by over 150 diets and values based on their dietary goals, their lifestyle preferences, their social values. It comes down to offering something like carbon neutral shipping so that they can, feel really good about the purchases they're making without having a negative impact on the environment. It's about really layering in value add content and educational information so that we can inspire them around products and categories they may not be familiar with and really facilitate an amazing experience around discovery. So those are areas that are strategically important to us, that we're investing deeply in, which we feel are essentially the direction in which a lot of online shopping is going, but certainly in the grocery category.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the market is clearly trending this way. I think for a long time, we just weren't really informed enough as consumers. We didn't really know what was out there. Now we do know what's out there, and there's all sorts of really cool snack makers, food makers, drink makers, figuring out ways to be more sustainable, to tailor to more diets, to do all that sort of stuff. And then also, a place like Thrive Market that actually, has a mission that is doing work yourselves. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the mission's fundamentally been around access. We believe that our role is to knock down all the barriers that exist in a consumer's way on their journey to live a healthier, more sustainable life. And there's three core pillars that we feel have historically prevented people from making that journey. And it boils down to price, geography, and information. So, hitting on price, historically, natural organic products have sold at a premium compared to conventional, more processed equivalents, which is interesting. If you sort of zoom out of it, it makes no sense that a product that has less ingredients and involves less manipulation of the product is actually more expensive to bring to market, but so it goes. And, if you look at a kind of a traditional health food grocer like Whole Foods, it's usually only been accessible to, call it the top 3 to 5% of the population from an income perspective. So our role when it comes to price is really bringing the healthier, organic, less processed, ethical version of the product to market at a price point that is comparable to a conventional equivalent and at a significant price advantage to full retail. So that's step one. Step two is geography. So depending on where you are, there may be amazing access to health food products, or they may not. If you're living in San Francisco, or we're fortunate enough to be in the west side of LA here, where healthy living and natural products are so ingrained into the day-to-day, and geographic access is not a real problem. However, if we look at our customer base, about half of them are in the Midwest and the Southeast, which are sort of traditionally regarded as health food deserts. You look across the country and you've got tens of millions of Americans who live in food deserts where they have to commute more than 10 miles to get to any kind of healthy grocery store. Our model is all about being able to hit every household in the US. We ship through national and regional carriers so that even if you don't have local options, and especially if you don't have local options, we have the ability to provide our consumers direct access to this catalog of product in a convenient way. And the last barrier is information. So even if you can afford the product, even if you are situated geographically in a way that it's easy for you to get to a store or get the product in your hands, not everyone has either the educational foundation or kind of the cultural foundation to make those healthy choices in an intuitive way. So our role there is to be a trusted guide and just introduce people to these categories of products and help them understand the advantages of natural organic in a way that is easy to understand, friendly, not preachy. And that's been a big commitment from the beginning, is to pair the utilitarian commerce with as much content and education as we can generate alongside, so that it's not an intimidating journey. It really is easy. And what we try to do is position ourselves in a way where if you trust Thrive Market, the brand, will make a lot of this decision making easier for you as the consumer. And by virtue of the membership, we guarantee a really high level of service. So there's low risk for someone going in.
And so checking out the website here before we hopped on, you're looking at $60, under $60 for an annual membership, similar to like what you do with something like Costco. Seems like, you get a free gift, you get this stuff. Seems like it's a no-brainer. Plus you get access to all this stuff. Sell our listeners a little bit on why they should become a member, because it seems pretty clear to me.
Yeah, and I think it's similar to those touchstone businesses, right? It's overwhelming value. So the reason Costco members are so passionate about their membership is, you go into Costco and you save hundreds of dollars over the course of your membership. So you renew. Our dynamic is essentially the same. So again, from a strict price point of view, our average member makes back their membership fee in under, just around 2 orders on the site today or the app. So you imagine, the number of grocery trips you'll run over a course of a year. Our average member is making back a very significant multiple on what they paid in to be Thrive Market member over the course of their annual membership. And that's just the price component, right? When you kind of add in the convenience of not having to go to the grocery store for any one of the product categories that we carry, the convenience of not having to research ingredients on your own, to go kind of read the nutrition label and, compare 30 different almond butters that you'll find on a storefront, even at a more curated grocery store like Whole Foods, for example. The fact that, we've really done a lot of the heavy lifting so that the cognitive load on customers is as low as possible. And they can trust us to make sure that we've brought the highest standards in terms of which products we'll put on our shelf compared to any other retailer out there. And third, it's the positive social impact. So, for every membership we sell to a paying customer, we offer one for free as part of our Thrive Gives program to a low-income family or student, teacher, someone who's essentially in need, where we recognize that, there are folks that we want to access the platform for whom even the $60 is a significant financial hurdle. So we want to be able to be in a position to give those memberships away for free and ensure that, whoever, whatever your social economic situation, you have the ability to access these healthy products. Beyond the free memberships we give away, we also have the ability for any customer to donate a portion or all of their savings at checkout, which we then proceed to turn around and provide grocery stipends and other support to those same communities through the Gives program. And we know for a fact that this resonates because our donor checkout rates are a significant multiple of what's been seen in traditional groceries. So we are attracting a consumer who's a conscious consumer who's thinking about utilitarian value, but also thinking more broadly. So the membership we offer, if you zoom out of it, is really boils down to this incredible utility, but also a community of shared values that you get to participate in as a Thrive Market member and contribute to a broader and broader range of people having access to healthy products.
I'm doing it. I'm signing up. You convinced me. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get under the hood a little bit. I want to know, it's all the stuff I eat anyway, so I'm like, hey, man, as well. I want to get under the hood a little bit from the technology perspective. It's a super simple platform, like effortlessly simple. I'm curious, like, what do you have going on to create this type of digital experience?
Yeah, so e-commerce platforms are sort of, the best analogy I can think of is that sort of duck on the water, where the consumer-facing piece should be as simple as possible and require as little work from the consumer as possible to achieve their tasks and their goals. Under the hood, there's always a tremendous amount of complexity with the duck sort of paddling furiously to keep it all going. To give you a little bit of a preview into our tech, when we originally launched the business, it was a monolithic application. It was based on the Magento eCommerce platform, which, for those folks listening, along with Shopify, was one of the 2 leading platforms in the space, back in 2014 when we launched. Since then, every aspect of that experience has been highly customized. We've moved the technology side of the house towards, microservices architecture on the platform side. We have dedicated client apps on web, iOS, and Android. Really heavy focus on asynchronous processing, on use of machine learning to drive personalization of the shopping experience, all those things where, a lot of work in the back end to create experiences that are seemingly very simple in the back end and hopefully in the front end and save the consumer a lot of time. From a team perspective, we organize into software engineering. We call them pods or squads. So cross-functional groups that iterate very rapidly on different parts of the customer experience. Those pods are cross-platform, so we're able to roll out improvements across both the web and mobile apps in a really rapid fashion in lockstep. And part of that's because, as you'll sort of discover over the course of your journey at Thrive, hopefully, our consumers are going to jump back and forth between platforms a lot. Obviously, COVID and stay at home being what it is, we see a lot more sort of desktop usage now. But historically, grocery shopping and kind of planning your groceries is something people are doing on the go. So our consumers are going to bounce back and forth between mobile web, desktop web, the native apps. We want to be there with our shoppers, kind of wherever, whenever they are, so that if they, suddenly discover that they ran out of toilet paper, ran out of mustard, they can quickly and easily add that into their basket. Language and technology wise, we're pretty language agnostic at this point. We started off with Magento as a PHP shop. Now, obviously, the client-side apps are built in Swift, Kotlin, or React.js on the front end. The platform and services are written in everything from Python to Java to Golang. Still a lot of PHP in there as well. We're mostly cloud-based. We have on-prem infrastructure in place across our fulfillment network to drive the hardware automation, our fulfillment centers, but we're primarily a cloud consumer. So that's a very sort of high level overview of the platform. Happy to obviously dive into any areas that are of particular interest.
Yeah, so kind of obviously a newer company, started not too long ago. Was this just a pretty obvious decision for you to go mostly cloud?
Yeah, I think, if you sort of think back to, I think it's about 2006, 2007, when AWS first hit the market. It was such a step function change in terms of the speed with which you could get a product in front of customers, right? It took an entire job function in terms of managing server hardware and data centers and so on, and abstracted it out. But it was definitely a no-brainer for us. Now, there are certain areas where we need on-premise hardware just from a technology perspective. So to give you some insight, we have hardware-based automation. So this is conveyance, sortation, kind of those big belts that you see when you look at a fulfillment warehouse that run inside our fulfillment centers. For that hardware to operate at the right speed, we have a piece of software called Warehouse Control System that has, I think it's something in the range of 4 millisecond latency requirements, which unfortunately the cloud is going to have a hard time supporting in a reliable way. So we have hardware inside the facilities to run a select amount of software where we have this very specialized technical need. Barring that, having everything in the cloud makes total sense for us. We're a globally distributed technology organization, particularly now that essentially our entire team is working from home. Not having physical hardware that we need to access, and the ability to manage as much of our destiny through configuration as possible is absolutely the way I think any earlier growth stage business should be going, and probably any enterprise as well.
Switching gears to the employee side of the house, the employee experience, how are you building all of your team's infrastructure? How do you think about, creating an awesome employee experience? How do you think about buying technology?
Yeah, so I think, there's definitely a lot there, and it's been interesting over the past few months putting some of those decisions to the test. One of the first principles is standardization of systems. So I think we have about 180 people in our corporate office or in corporate roles, having them work on the smallest number of systems possible, both from a learning curve perspective and then also from a consistency and experience perspective. So to give you a point of view, for example, we've gone from, when it was less managed, from 3 or 4 or 5 project management systems that were sort of homegrown within individual departments to standardizing or on 1 or 2. We've gone from file shares being on Dropbox, Nbox, and Google Drive, and a few others to standardizing on Usage Drive. And I think as a business scales, at some point it's really important to put some stakes in the ground so that everyone's on the same page, so that when it comes to onboarding, documentation, IT support, just the ongoing ability to manage people's workflows, there's again sort of less decision points and less inconsistency. The second piece is, leveraging best of breed tools. So, one of the sort of fortuitous examples for us is, we onboarded Zoom and started to really lean into the use of Zoom to drive meetings several months before everyone had to work from home for COVID. So we already had a little bit of a head start on the technology side, building a digital sort of a more virtualized working culture, as opposed to having to learn in a very, very accelerated time frame when everyone needed to leave the office. And then finally, when it comes to build versus buy, I think the key thing is, and this is applicable for both the internal side of the house and the consumer-facing side of the house. This is one of the lessons that I really learned between companies was, focus your build resources on key points of differentiation and buy everything else you can within reason and budget, obviously. So, sort of the most impactful example that I can remember on that was we launched Thrive Market on an open source e-commerce platform. We didn't, strictly speaking, buy it. We took the free edition at the time. But my first business, there was sort of enough specialization there that I made the decision to build from scratch, and that was, in hindsight, maybe the right decision, maybe not, but it certainly made a huge difference in terms of, it took me 9 months to get our first product from sort of pen and paper to full launch. At Thrive Market, we got there in, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks, including setting up a warehouse and all the other infrastructure that goes into business. So, being able to leverage everything out there, not reinventing the wheel, really being rigorous about use of resources to build only the pieces you really, really need, which are, custom to your business, key points of differentiation, something that you really want to be defensible from an IT perspective or from a business perspective.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, the speed to market you can go now is just, it really is. It puts those build or buy decisions, really into perspective. Do you have like a buying committee, or like how do you go about like sourcing those things, and especially for like other parts of the business as well, like getting feedback from the other business owners or business units?
Yeah, we don't have a formal committee. I mean, we definitely have a budgeting process for. I mean, IT manages a centralized software budget for the most part. I mean, there's a few pieces of software where only one department will use it, and then it kind of sits in their queue. And it's a collaborative process between my team and, in some cases, the rest of the business, and in some cases, a single department that has a specialized need. Where I have a head of technology operations that reports to me. His core accountability is managing all the enterprise apps. We're going to sit down and look at what the solutions are out there in the market. We'll obviously solicit a ton of feedback from the rest of the executive team in terms of software that they've used in the past and been successful with. And we're going to try and find a balance between obviously the best solution from a kind of pure feature set cost perspective and what the business will be comfortable adopting, where we'll see the ROI, right? Because you can put a potentially higher quality but more esoteric piece of software in front of people, but if adoption is low, you're not going to get the value that you're looking for. So it's usually a balance, and then the sort of contract negotiation process ensues. And the area that we've invested in the most is really not the process of buying the software; it's the process of onboarding the software. So
yeah, sure.
It's pretty easy to work with a sales rep and get a deal done. That's not usually the hard part. It's making sure that we're being rigorous once we've made that purchase decision. We have good buy-in from all the other key stakeholders on utilization. We as the tech org need to go above and beyond in terms of providing onboarding materials, education, documentation, ongoing support. We'll usually kind of beta test internal software rollouts within either the whole tech team or parts of the tech team, because folks are just a little bit more digitally native and willing to play around with new tools. So really investing as heavily as possible and making sure that we ensure not just that we're picking the right tools, but we're ensuring the organizational success on those tools. It's not sort of a once and done thing. It requires a lot of practice and repetition, and a little bit of kind of playing bad cop and holding people accountable, but really mostly being there in a supporting capacity to make sure that people can get on board and get their questions and problems sorted out easily.
You mentioned a little bit some of those early learnings from having started previous companies, being able to figure out like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't build this thing or whatever it is. So I'm curious whether it's, from your time at Microsoft or earlier or your startup time, is there anything that really like helped inform some of the decision making you have now as CTO?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So this is actually one of the most fun parts of my job, and kind of looking back at the past 10, 15 years of my career has been the constant ability to learn and encounter new problems and make new mistakes and learn from old ones. I think the first set of learnings were really coming from large scale software development at Microsoft down to literally kind of blank slate as co-founder at my first startup. And there, I was really in a position to lean very heavily in a lot of the best practices I learned in terms of software development. So, like ultimately, I think big companies can be an awesome training ground for anyone who wants to go lead technology from the inception of a business. I think it really instills into you the right best practices when it comes to building for scale, really high commitment to quality, rigorous hiring, repeatable process, which are all things that sort of I think are undervalued at startups and in some cases rightfully so, but often, being able to bring the right mix of structure and flexibility to those early years of a company, having seen it done at real scale, but then sort of confronted with the reality of having no resources and really quick timelines sets a good balance. On the flip side, there's lots of change as well, right? Ultimately, you come down to a world where you have to start thinking about everything versus just thinking about your function. So like great examples in hiring. So, I must have interviewed well over 100 candidates, 200 candidates in my time at Microsoft. And I never once thought about a hiring budget. I just thought about hiring the smartest technologists that we could place into the business. And when you're doing that at a startup, you're confronted with a variety of other constraints, right? Like, how many people can I hire? What can I afford to pay them? Are they going to be a good cultural fit for a startup versus just being the kind of the smartest person in the room? Where am I going to source them from? It sort of goes on and on. So definitely broadened my thinking as I started to progress as an early stage CTO. The other big thing that was evolutionary that didn't really come from kind of the big company world, particularly at Microsoft, where you have very, very long ship cycles, is really thinking in terms of tangible milestones for your business and being, we sort of use the term internally still, being really ruthless when it comes to prioritization and being willing to make the right compromises to hit those milestones. So, when you're in the very early stages of a business, it's great to have a North Star vision as to where you want to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now. It's probably 10 times more important to be able to walk backwards in that vision and be able to chart a course that de-risks you getting there over the next, week, month, quarter. Because in the early days, like those are really the time frames when there's the business is still at existential risk at all times until you can prove out the next set of hypotheses, so you can get out there and scale. At a personal level, the sort of one of the biggest learnings was on this idea of intrinsic motivation. So, and I faced this in a pretty tough way the first kind of few weeks, I would say, at my first startup. Was when you're in a big company, almost whatever role you're in, like you're on the tracks, right? You're on the rails. Like you come in, you have a routine, you've got expectations. Like your workday is well organized just by virtue of being in that environment and being part of a bigger team. You're employee number one at a company. You really have to drive yourself, and you got to figure out, what's your pace? What are you going to focus on next? Have a much higher sense of ownership and be much more organized than you would necessarily at a big enterprise. So those are all learnings coming from big company to small company. And then kind of thinking through the second piece of it, which is, having been through two startup companies now, a lot of interesting common themes have come up that I had a chance to reflect on. I think the first one of those is pick good business partners. Again, two companies in a row, like at the stage I joined, it was literally the co-founding team and a PowerPoint deck that represented what we wanted to get done for the next 5 to 7 years. So, it's really a bet on people. And the first time around, I was very fortunate. I got the chance to work with someone that I had a prior history with. We'd known each other for almost 10 years before we got into business together. So there's a very high level of of trust there, both at a personal level and also at a professional level. When I came to look for my co-founders at Thrive Market, I was definitely trying to be as strategic as possible and make sure that I was focusing on partnering up with folks who were experienced entrepreneurs, had seen success in the past, kind of knew what they were doing in the space. Ultimately, though, a lot of it just comes down to the human dynamic and your ability to feel like these are the right people to be with during good times, but also during bad times. Like, can you spend 16 hours a day with this group, for weeks, months, years on end as you build out a business and go through this journey together. So feel very, very fortunate there. The second piece, and again, this is not technology specific, is pick a good business model. So ultimately, my role as CTO or any technologist out there can have an enormous influence on the success or failure of an enterprise. But I don't really believe you can take user experience or tech and kind of outwork a model that fundamentally doesn't work, right? So, you've got to think about the market size. You've got to think about the unit economics. And one of the things that made Thrive Market really attractive as I went down this analysis was this idea of sort of stacking up what I call unfair competitive advantages from an very early stage. For us, that boiled down to already having some really amazing team members that are joining the company pre-launch, already having the support of an entire ecosystem of health and wellness influencers that were investors in the early stages of the business and just standing by and ready to promote us to their audiences, having the right unit economics based on the membership model so that we could scale in a sustainable way. So all these were considerations that were very much top of mind going into my second business that I think anyone considering this journey should definitely should think very, very seriously about. When it comes down to the tech side, I think I've sort of had big success in this. I've definitely made a lot of mistakes in this area, but definitely build for both scale and sustainability. The thing that I think people underestimate is how long your code will be running. If you're lucky enough and your business continues to scale, we're still looking at parts of the product today, more than 6 years in, where there's stuff that was written pre-launch in 2014 that is, that it could be standing up, 7, 8, 9-figure revenue streams to the business. And obviously, we're refactoring and removing a lot of that technical debt. But, again, if I were to go back through this process again, I think we were more rigorous at Thrive Market than I was in my last business. I'd be even more rigorous, making sure that I'm building a solid foundation, even if it's a little bit more expensive upfront in terms of use of resources, because I think the long-term dividends of that investment in quality, I think, will always pay off, both in terms of just business performance, total cost of ownership of the software, and I think most importantly, setting the right culture for the team from day one. And that's sort of that's the last piece, right? Is a real investment in culture and values from the very early days of the business. And at Thrive, we've been really fortunate because by virtue of being a mission-driven company, there's already a very strong unifying factor that draws people to this organization and keeps them aligned. But as leaders, and this is sort of when I think about my role as co-founder versus my role as CTO or head of technology or product or whatever, it's really making sure that we codify our culture and values, incorporate it into our day-to-day, get to a point and maintain that point where everyone in the company is incredibly aligned in terms of not just what our objectives and our mission are, but how we choose to operate in our path to getting there. What do day-to-day decisions look like? What do day-to-day behaviors look like? And having that feel really consistent from one team to the next and one decision and situation to the next. That cohesiveness is really valuable as the company scales. Because it's really easy to get that right when you're just 10 people sitting in a room and everyone's just by virtue of the small scale incredibly aligned. You start to scale the organization out, the level of complexity grows, you start to hire faster. Having that incredibly strong cultural foundation is what keeps the business marching to a single beat year after year after year. So sorry to ramble on there, but I had a lot of thoughts on this from a variety of angles.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. And there's so many different things, to take away from that. But I think the blending of, going from a big company to a small company and then turning the small company into a mid-sized company and hopefully bigger is a crazy roller coaster for anybody to go on. And, the org is going to shift, each step along the way. I forget who we were talking to, but one of the founders was talking about how the moment when they didn't know every single employee's name, right? And they're like, this is crazy that I don't know, every single person, but, but that size happens.
And I think it's, the nice thing is one of those sort of piece of learning is, I think if you invest in hiring the right top talent early, and as a leader, you have the ability to delegate and get leverage, as founders and as senior leaders in any business, I think having that good balance between how much time we spend on business strategy, how much time we spend on execution, and how much time we spend on people is really important. So, and I've gone through different phases of this where sometimes I'm so in the weeds that exact thing happens. Like I kind of put my head up and I see someone that I don't recognize, or multiple people I don't recognize. And I do feel to some degree, past certain scale it's unavoidable, but we definitely want to be in a position where we're building those human connections and that relational fiber and being really intentional about it. And some of that is making sure that you carve out the time in your day to do it. A lot of it's also been driven through organizational process. So for example, we do what are called Friday lunches at Thrive now. We've been doing them for, I think, year and a half. And it's essentially all the leaders in the org split up and are essentially randomly assigned to very small groups of folks just to break bread and get to know each other and talk not just about what their sort of roles and functions and challenges and so on are, but really get to know each other at a personal level. So I think it is, again, from a cultural standpoint, really important for companies to be intentional in setting up, again, process, for lack of a better word, to facilitate that human connection. Because I think it may feel like it's an hour out of everyone's day, but you kind of stack up the improved context that people build over time, the ability to know someone's name and be willing to ask them a hard question that you may not have felt comfortable doing otherwise. I think it does translate, not immediately, but over the long term into both sort of happier, more engaged employees, but just equally importantly, better business results. So again, that's something that we've really leaned into as leaders in the organization, and we're nowhere near perfect, but it's an area we're going to keep investing as much as possible.
So I'm curious about the future of home shopping. As I mentioned, I literally checked out of Thrive Market here. I have $50 worth of snacks coming my way, free shipping, literally since we've been on this call. This isn't even a paid plug. I was just like, this is great. While we were sitting here chatting on the podcast. So it seems like delivery services like Thrive Market are clearly going to be the new normal. I think a lot of people experience that with the rise of COVID and not being able to go out of their house all the time. If they've never done a box of the month or something like that, maybe they tried it. So, what is the future of home shopping? What is the blend of in-person versus at home?
I think it's, we're definitely in a very interesting time, particularly in our category. So, you mentioned COVID. So one of the interesting side effects that's occurred over the past few months is this incredibly rapid habit formation around the online grocery space and the online CPG space in general. So coming into the year, I think something like 3 to 5% of households had ever purchased a grocery product online. Fast forward 3 or 4 months, and that number is now, I believe, in the 30 to 50% range. And the interesting thing is that all the data and the customer feedback suggests that if retailers and brands are able to provide a high quality customer experience on that online channel, the customers are willing to form a new habit versus going back to only buying in brick and mortar. In terms of where so that's obviously good news for our business and symptomatic of a broader change to come. And this is reflected in a lot of the financial projections for how far that industry is going to grow when it comes to online grocery. When it comes to what's actually going to change, how things are going to evolve. So the historical e-commerce foundation was this sort of trinity of price, convenience, and assortment, right? So those are the pillars of utilitarian value. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. But I think what we've seen and what is at the crux of our strategy is that the way consumers approach their relationship with a retailer has changed, and the way they look at those pillars and what their expectations are. So if you think about assortment, for example, the kind of Gen 1 e-commerce was really about having as much choice as possible and having access to every product under the sun. Now consumers are faced with the tyranny of choice if they haven't gone through that, and are really looking for someone who can, you've got a lot more curated experiences out there that, help cut through the noise and help be active partners in helping consumers select the right products. There's also this idea of being able to browse and search and find something versus a more elevated discovery experience where, consumers want the brands they're interacting with to help introduce them to new products that they wouldn't have been aware of before. And this is really, from Thrive's perspective, where, being the hub where innovative new brands can launch products and get exposure to a large, extremely high quality audience, but also leaning into content and education so that when you find something unfamiliar, we can help you understand how to contextualize that into your life. And we can actually find products that you haven't discovered based on your shopping behaviors, your declared, dietary and lifestyle preferences that you haven't actually had a chance to experience before. So, again, having that retail relationship be more active and be more one of trust. Convenience, sort of your very impressive multitasking, having been able to build an order on the fly is very much symptomatic.
It took 2 seconds.
Yeah, and that's how people shop now, right? So it's not that you sit down, you have a dedicated session, you don't look at it like writing an essay, you're shopping on the go. And for us, it means we have to be mobile first. Like any retailer is facing this. Well over half our revenue now comes on the phone. And particularly in the grocery space, we want to be integrated into people's natural habits. So when you think about technologies like voice assist, IoT in the future, being able to connect with our customers on the go, in their kitchens, wherever they may be, in the most natural way possible, so that, again, we lower that friction and just make it as easy and convenient and low touch as possible to get what they needed in their hands. The rapid adoption of subscription services is another phenomenon in this area, right? Where, people find a product that they like and they're able to form a habit around, and they're much more comfortable today than they were, 5 or 10 years ago, participating in an auto ship program or a subscription driven kind of recurring shipment program. But then more than ever, I think they also want an experience that's personalized and tailored to them, right? So whether you think about subscription or the kinds of products that we're introducing for product discovery, it's really important down the line for retailers to know their customers' needs and not speak to them in kind of a one-size-fits-all, tone-deaf manner, but rather, really honor the consumer's motivation and create a one-to-one shopping journey for them. This is an area that we've invested in really heavily, both from a user experience standpoint, a data science and data strategy standpoint. So, all our marketing communications, a lot of our customer experience now is reactive and takes into account both the implicit and explicit signals that the consumer is giving us in terms of the product categories, the brands, the dietary and lifestyle values, the specific products, and the timelines at which they want those products. And we use all those data inputs to create these experiences that, again, hopefully look and feel really simple and really personal, but ideally get the right message to the right consumer at the right time versus just washing everyone in a kind of a sea of relatively irrelevant information. I think the final piece is community, right? So I don't think people want to feel isolated and think of these conversations with brands as kind of one directional, where a brand kind of just markets to a consumer. So I think membership really becomes a shared identity where we want to be having conversations with our consumers about the products, about a lot of the other topics that are sort of highly relevant to their experiences. We're also seeing in this space that source of authority has really changed from kind of the traditional health advocacy towards much more of an influencer, micro-influencer based system where these are folks, again, who have direct bidirectional conversations with their consumers. And what we've seen a lot of success with is incorporating those influencers as thought leaders to help evangelize businesses like ours. So, to kind of zoom out of all of it, I think the consumer is becoming more conscious. They're becoming more selective in terms of who they want to interact with as a brand. And that interaction is deepening in what I feel is a really, really positive way. So, and there are a lot of companies out there doing absolutely amazing things, both in the grocery space and others to capitalize on this. And, we certainly hope to be a lasting part of that ecosystem.
All right, let's get into our lightning round. These questions are fast and easy. Just like the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience, go to salesforce.com/platform to learn more. Lightning round questions. Sasha, are you ready?
Sure, go for it.
Number 1, what hobby or habit have you picked up in shelter in place?
I've started to cook a lot more. So that's definitely been one of the positive externalities of being at home all the time is, I'm getting full use out of my kitchen. Ironically, my fitness regime is also picked up by virtue of having not that many things to do other than stay at home and work out.
Do you have a favorite book or podcast or TV show that you've been binging?
I've been watching. I'm on season 3 of Peaky Blinders right now. I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but that one's really sucked me in. My business partner also watched no TV, so when he recommended it, I thought this was definitely something worth considering. So enjoyed a couple of seasons of that.
If you weren't a CTO, what do you think you'd be doing?
That's a really interesting one. Probably traveling. I think that was one of the things outside of work that I enjoyed the most pre-shelter in place. So definitely looking forward to just spending more time just discovering the world.
Best advice for a first-time CTO?
One thing is believe in yourself. Like as an entrepreneur, you're going to be confronted with an unending number of moments of self-doubt and wondering whether you're the right person to be doing this now or in the future. The answer is usually yes. So I would say have confidence in yourself. The other piece of advice is get mentorship. So have a community around you that you can lean on for support. Your role is to solve all the problems. It is not reasonable for you to have the knowledge intrinsically to solve all those problems. So build relationships with other folks in the technology community, really leverage all those around you to ensure you're doing everything you can to support the business. If there's one thing that I know about the tech space is that people are collaborative, people share information, people put things out there. No one really holds this stuff close to the vest. So there's just an incredible number of brilliant resources out there for you to reach out to solve whatever it is that you're confronted with.
Well, that's it. That's all we got for today. Sasha, thanks so much for coming on. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
No, thank you for taking the time. This was a lot of fun. This is actually, I think this is the first one of these I've ever done. So
there you go.
So really enjoyed the experience. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks. You too.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.